Welcome to the Ladies Talk Show. This is your host, Leah Richheimer. We are very exciting. In chapter 10, we are working, we are growing, we are becoming the best us we can be. I'm very proud of you for working on this. It ain't easy, but we're having fun with it. So that's the important part. Okay, here's the thing. We're on Marriage Secrets, chapter 10. How would grandma handle it? It's page 247. So, how did I learn how to grow in my anger management? As a child, I watched my grandmother charm a room full of people everywhere we went. We'd be standing in line at the bank, everyone grumpy and miserable. She'd start a conversation with someone about the weather, and suddenly the whole line was in on it and smiling. On the tram at Disneyland, she doled out long string licorice to all the grandkids and then gave a piece to everyone else there, including the driver. One summer morning, during a slumber party at Grandma's, all the cousins crawled out of their sleeping bags, which were lined up under the dining room table, the makeshift tent she made for us, and we went exploring. We found a high cupboard in Grandma's garage, jammed full of wrapped presents. This was simply too irresistible for us, so we opened all of them in one go. My grandma found us surrounded by heaps of wrapping paper, playing with remote control cars, dolls, games, puzzles, and Legos. She looked at us having the time of our lives, took a very deep breath, and went back into the kitchen. To this day, I have no idea who those gifts were originally for, but she gave us cousins a bigger gift that day than the toys. That is how a queen handles anger. At some point, I decided that I wanted to be more like my grandmother than the powerhouse woman I'd always admired, who lived life at the top of their lungs. So when a rage threatened to overtake me, I asked myself, how would my grandma have handled it? And when I had kids, I worked like crazy, control any inclination to yell, usually by leaving the room for a minute. Maybe not the most mature method, but it sure beat the alternative. I really worked on it. I still remember when a large platter of spaghetti and meat sauce was dumped on the floor by the kids horsing around. I handed them paper towels without saying a word and even refrained from giving them ominous facial expressions as well. What a triumph. And as it turns out, guilt worked better than yelling ever could. Thereafter, horsing around was curtailed during dinner time with nary a peep from yours truly. Okay, the enemy within. So I consider myself to have come a long way in my anger control, certainly in comparison to where I started. And yet, I'm prone, just like every other living, breathing human being, to being overcome with anger. The only difference might be that anger usually sneaks its way into my mind in stealth mode, so it's usually very hard to discern. Someone will do something to me and I will go into righteous indignation mode and not even realize that anger has crept into my brain undetected. When I'm right and someone else is most certainly wrong, my anger does not in any way feel like the lowly scoundrel that it is. I feel perfectly justified in bearing a grudge and letting anger consume me wholly and comprehensively. I have the preponderance of evidence on my side after all, and they are guilty as charged. Thus, my anger intensifies unabated. The sad part is there are no breadcrumbs lining the path, so I often have to find my way back home. I get stuck there indefinitely. At least I can recognize the syndrome and hide away to minimize the collateral damage. But as challenged as I am in this area, I have made great efforts to grow and now recognize this pattern much earlier in the cycle. I think about what triggered my anger. I contemplate all the variables and I try to change my actions. I'm proud to say that I'm at least proactive and growing, which is what Hashem expects of us. So why do I share all this with you? Because I want to show you that with knowledge, introspection, and dedication, anyone can improve their anger management skills, even me. I also want you to appreciate that the work is never done. Every time we conquer one challenge, another one comes along up the ante. Further, for whatever reason, Hashem put anger in our lives, and perhaps so we can earn our closeness to our husband and appreciate the closeness all the more. But the bottom line is, the more we grow in our ability to control our anger and yelling, the closer we will be to our husband and to everyone else. The ultimate goal we need to keep in our minds, and especially in our hearts, is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that teaches us a priceless lesson. Be slow to anger and easy to pacify. With this goal in mind, it will help us to gain mastery over our own emotions. There's a similar idea stated by Rav Eliezer in Pirkei Avos. Do not be easy to anger. This can be a valuable affirmation to use for ourselves in the midst of a rising temper. Just try to keep repeating these words to see if it helps you to calm yourself. It's also crucial to recognize that buried deeply within many communications with our husband, there's often some lingering anger. Until we can acknowledge the proverbial elephant in the room, the anger, we are doomed to be pushed and pulled by various forces that we simply do not understand. Until we can own up to our own anger issues and work towards making them better, every day we risk being mired in confusing emotions that keep us from closeness to our husbands. Some of that anger may be based on feeling hurt by something our husband said or did not say or do. But very often, my students acknowledge that most of their anger has other causes. Perhaps it stems from pain caused by people who hurt them in the past, or frustration with the children, parents, or coworkers, or simply from aggravation that life isn't going the way they planned. Their husbands just happen to be the nearest scapegoat. So any minor infraction by him causes a torrent of anger to spill forth. Woo! Okay, we're working through it, guys. Gosh, we're almost done with this chapter, but let's stop for questions. Go ahead, Gila. What are you?
Okay, great chapter. Mary asks, my boss tells me I should be more assertive and fierce. In my home, I'm working on staying soft. Will it work to have two personas depending on where I am?
Interesting. I'm not certain that her boss is sitting there say, be mean. He's probably saying be more aggressive. Like if a customer says, oh, you say, oh, you want to buy 100 units. Why don't you buy 200? It's a much better price. And like, no, I just want 100. Right. And maybe to be more aggressive would be to say, okay, well, actually, you would, to try again, instead of saying, oh, okay, you would say, oh, all right, that's fine. But just so you know, you'd say $37 if you bought the 200 at the same time. So I don't know that that's necessarily being harsh or mean or not, or letting your anger out. It's just being more aggressive, which is it's true. You could become more aggressive at work and then you go home and you treat your husband a little bit more harshly. That could be true. So you have to watch that. But I don't think that aggression and harshness at work would necessarily translate. And I actually doubt that your boss wants you to be harsh. He might want you to be more aggressive. So to answer your question, they're two separately different things, and that might mean extra work for you to have to flip the switch more often. And that's sorry you have to deal with that, but it's definitely doable. Good question. Okay, good.
Okay, Javiva asks, we struggle with setting boundaries in our relationship, and it often leads to conflicts. How can we establish healthy boundaries to prevent misunderstandings and anger?
So it's very hard to answer that because I don't know what you mean by boundaries. Like
things that trigger each other, maybe?
Oh, that one, yeah, maybe. Let's go on to the next question. And then what was her name? Aviva? Do you mind?
Aviva.
Aviva. Yeah. Do you mind
Aviva.
Haviva? Okay, sweetheart. Do you mind writing in to clarify what you meant by that? We're going to go to the next question and then we'll come right back. The very next question is this one, but I want to know what you mean by boundaries because I can't answer the question without knowing that. Okay, go to the next question, Keela.
Okay, so Shira asks, someone was rude to my husband and I shouted at them not to talk to my husband like that. Is there a place for anger if it's to show my husband I have his back?
Oh, I love that question. Yay. Good on you. So that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. I think so. But again, it depends on the harshness. If someone said something, put your husband down or whatever, and you lash out at them, it kind of shows you in a bad light. You know what I'm saying? So you might be saving your husband, but then you're like, oh, she's got to live. Yeah, that husband has to live with her. So I would tone it down a bit. I mean, if someone says something about your husband and you feel the anger, you could say something like, Oh, do you mind not putting my husband down, or or something like you can do it in a softer way, perhaps. I don't know that I would shout at them. But again, we don't know why God put anger in the world, but he did put it there. Maybe, to use anger to put to create distance in our relationship with our husband is kind of the Yetzer Hara usurping or taking over our taking us over, whereas if we take our anger and we use it to fight injustice, or we use it to fight, somebody is in prison and they shouldn't be, and we fight, fight, fight until we free them. So anger can be used for the good or for the bad. Obviously, you want to use it for the good, and that's your question, is saying I'm using it for the good for my husband. Um, uh, so yes, I definitely think you could use but again, I would keep it that your tone and your mannerisms and how you chastise that person for putting your husband down, do it as nicely as you can. That's the answer to that. Good question. Wow. Okay, good. We're going back to Habiba's question. Go.
Um, I like to joke and I find it humorous to bug my husband, and he gets frustrated, but I'm just trying to create a joking atmosphere because he's so serious. I don't see what the harm is.
Uh-huh.
I guess she's trying to lighten the mood, but it's not. She's
Yeah, if it's not working, it ain't working. If he's so serious, so I would talk to him and say, um, you have a very serious countenance, which is why I married you. You're a good guy, and you take your responsibilities seriously, and so I like that aspect of you. But I also feel like there needs to be a lighter atmosphere in the home, and I feel like I'm the wife. It's my responsibility to, make the house joyous. So I realize my sense of humor isn't working, or it's annoying, or it's whatever. Please, husband, and again, you're taking your bowl of problems and you're putting them in his lap, and you're saying, please tell me, what do you think we can do to solve this? See what he says. That's what you can do. It's a good question, and you should be proud of yourself for trying to change the atmosphere in the home for the better. That's beautiful. And if it's frustrating and annoying to him, you have to take that into consideration and see what he wants. Good, good. Okay.
okay. Sippy's question is, after so many years of yelling and having outbursts, I feel like I've lost trust of my kids and husband. I'm really trying hard, but anytime I slip up, I lose their trust again. What do I do?
You mean she keeps being angry and she feels like they don't trust her now? The
Yeah,
anger.
she's nervous that the next time she loses it, she's losing their trust again, but she is work.
Right,
She's
right,
conscious and she's working on it.
right. You might mention it. First of all, we talk about when we're talking about shalom bayis, we're talking about your relationship with your husband. We're not getting into the kids thing because midos don't split. So if you work on this with your husband, it's going to trickle down to the rest of all of your relationships, your children and your extended family and your friends and your community, and to the world, for sure. So, but in terms of your ownership of what has transpired in the past is very inspiring. And if you, I don't know, it depends on the age of the kids, and it depends on, sometimes if you say to a kid, boy, I really blew it yesterday. I meant to do this and I did that, whatever. It's very um, helpful to a kid to not, some parents always want their kid to think they're perfect, and that's not real. And it's hard for a kid to adjust to reality when there's a certain way that their parent always presents to them. So, owning up to your mistakes and your errors can be very empowering to a kid to realize that, boy, in the face of how you felt yesterday and what the mistakes you made, still today you put it through the, you knocked it out of the ballpark. Wow, that's inspiring. But for this issue, in terms of you know, I was going to say that you could say to your kids, listen, I know that, I've had lots of outbursts. I'm really working on it. I don't know that I would share that with a child. You certainly can share it with your husband, and that might be good enough. It might be you tell it to your husband, and, that brings a certain closeness and a certain amount of him. If someone's mean, and they're just mean, you go to dislike them. But if someone's mean and they say, I know I'm mean, it's bad habits, whatever, I'm really working on it. I don't even mind you pointing out, if you do it nicely, that I need to soften my words or make them nicer, that's inspiring. It makes you feel closer to them. It makes you feel like they're vulnerable and they're working on themselves, which is beautiful. But I would stick with that with just your husband. It's a great question. Okay, did she finally write in?
Yes. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm going to just repeat the question for anybody
Oh, good.
who
Thank you.
lost
For
us here.
me. Okay. Okay, good.
Okay, so Haviva asks, we struggle with setting boundaries in our relationship, and it often leads to conflicts. How can we establish healthy boundaries to prevent misunderstandings and anger outbursts? So, Haviva, we have your back, and you wrote back to us. What I mean by boundaries is he's always telling me what to do about what I should do at work or how I should cook or raise the kids. So that's what she means by boundaries.
And that's causing what's the first part of the question? Now I get the boundaries. The first part of the question is
It
what?
leads to conflicts. So how could she establish healthy boundaries without having misunderstanding? I guess she feels like if that's her domain and he's putting his nose in her business and she doesn't like it and she doesn't want to get angry about it and she wants to communicate it nicely.
I see.
She feels like this needs to be a boundary. So the question is it a boundary? I guess, number one.
So yeah, I mean, look, there's territory. The different people have different territory, and there's different takes on it. And every relationship is also different. But typically, our Masorah does set those boundaries, and I think you need to ask a shaila, a question of your Rav, to ask what is and isn't. Boundaries. For instance, some people say that anything that has to do with decorating the house is the woman's purview and the man doesn't have anything to say about it. But then there's another Gemara that says a wife should bring everything close to a husband that he likes and take away from him anything he doesn't like. So how do you, adjust those things? So each marriage, each family has to sort of figure out those boundaries and what, and if the husband cares about how the house looks, then that's a different story as if he could care less. And then, why is he giving his 2%? She probably shouldn't ask him what he thinks about it and just do what she wants. Although it's nice to ask him. So those kind of boundaries can be, there are some set things, but you need to know what's done in your community and what your Rav thinks and, like that. But for her answer of how she can deal with it is get answers to that question first. Once you know the questions to that, then figure out and make a very, very detailed plan of how you're going to bring it up to your husband so that you don't make him defensive, don't make him feel like badly, don't make him feel like he's bad and wrong and he's horrible and blah, blah, blah. How are you going to say it in a way that he wants to help you? That's the secret. That's the Bini Sarah. That's the woman's intuition, using your intuition to be able to, bring out the best in your husband and also get what you need, get what you want, is having the foresight to think about how you're going to say it. So if she right now, whenever he gets in her boundaries, she's having anger explosion. I assume that's why this came up in this, we're doing anger, the chapter on anger or whatever, or mastering our anger. If she's blasting him every time he does it, she needs to work on that. And no matter what he says or does, he doesn't deserve to be blasted at. So I think there's you've got some information to figure out. And even if a Rav says, yes, he shouldn't interfere with your work, whatever, it wouldn't be so nice to say, this is, not your territory. We need boundaries. I mean, maybe she needs more boundaries than he does, or maybe he feels like we're the same neshama. Of course, I'm going to give input, or maybe he's giving his input too pushy. So all of those need to be explored and discussed and compromised and figured out. And that only can happen by having a really good conversation with your husband at a time when you're not in the battlefield, but a separate time, and bringing this topic up and saying, I'm not sure how to handle this because I see myself getting defensive and angry over stuff when I feel like you're not, honoring my boundaries. And what do you think we can do about this? And, are these real, do you feel that I don't have a right to have boundaries in this, or like that? So again, you got some homework to do to figure out what's appropriate boundaries in your community, and from what your Rav thinks. And then you have to have a conversation. Good luck, good work. Thank you for answering that because we're all on the edge of our seats wondering what you're done. Okay.
Okay, great. So Kaylee asks, I'm extremely loud and my husband is extremely quiet. Of course, they're paired. He often tells me to stop yelling and getting so worked up when really I'm just being animated. I feel like he just doesn't get me.
I hear. I hear. So tell him that you are going to try and compromise. And for you, I know because people I know are animated. So yeah, it's like like that, whatever. So I could understand how a quiet person that would come across like slow down, chill out, sleep, like that. So she should say, I'm in a kind of a rowdy mood. Do you want me to tell this to my sister first so that when I tell it to you, it's not so blah, and I'm going to try and work on toning it down and not yelling and not talking so loud and not raising my voice so much and whatever. But can you also I'll go a little this way and you go a little that way. So, you be a little bit more chilled about because I feel like shut down. Like when you say, tone it down, you're being so loud. I feel like my enthusiasm and joy of life is being suppressed a little bit. So how do we balance that? And, again, hand the problem to your husband, say, can we brainstorm different solutions for this? Also, I would point out to him that, one of the things you loved about me since the day you married me, or asked me to marry you is the fact that I'm full of life. And there's good sides to it, and then there's challenging sides, which is that my volume is a little bit more than you're used to. So I can work on it, but can you also come a little bit towards me? It's a great thing. Okay, I think you said one. We have time for one last.
So my husband started a night job. He learns during the day. He told me he feels guilty the whole time because he knows I would want him to be home and spend time together. Of course, I want him home, but I'm so happy for him to get out and bring the extra money into the home. How can I go about encouraging him and making him feel good about myself? And then in parentheses, she wrote, I have trouble expressing myself sometimes.
I mean, you should just tell him. Look, if you have trouble expressing yourself, write him a letter and say, I want you to know all the things you just wrote in that thing. Whatever you just said, what you said in that email, write that, change it up, whatever, and write it to your husband and say, I'm really proud of you. And I have a hard time expressing myself sometimes, but you should just know, don't feel guilty anymore. I'm really, there are times at nights when I feel like, oh, I wish he was here, but that's, just a momentary weakness of mine. But my overall guiding thing, or my overall feeling and emotion about it, is I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled that it brings Panarsa to the family, and money to the family. And I feel like it's a great move. So number one, you should not feel guilty. Number two, I'm very proud of you. Number three, if I'm feeling like upset that, I don't have the help that I need, sometimes it's a very tough night. This kid had the exploding taper, that one, the kid that had the test on an exam, and, everything's happening at once, those times. And I might, feel like, why is it this way? But that's just a temporary feeling. And the overall thing is I'm totally on board with this job, and you just need to know that. So very, very good questions, ladies. Wow, you guys are deep and good. And okay, let me give you the homework for today. Is one time this week, you are to do a little bit of analysis of what triggers your anger. Because understanding your triggers, when they happen, how they happen, when they're recurring, especially when you have patterns of anger, that is understanding that gives us huge amount of power in overcoming it. Okay, this is Leah Richheimer for the Ladies Talk Show. We'll see you next time, and keep up the good work. Good job, guys. If you want more, we have so much more. If you want to learn our Masorah and have an awesome marriage, the first thing we have is a coaching program. If you are awesome with people and you want to know the Masorah better than 99% of the people on the planet Earth, like for reals, okay? It's a 4-month program. It's very intense. We have major scholarships, and we have somebody who's granted in a lot to pay for a big bulk of it. It's still a little expensive, but for what you get, and then you can start charging money to know it. That's the coaching program. Don't miss it. Go to www.masorah.com www.ladiestalkshow.com. We do retreats. We do all kinds of stuff. You'll find it there. www.ladiestalkshow.com. Thanks for being with us. Leah Richheimer for the Ladies Talk Show.